Hello everyone, welcome to week 3 of Career and Employment Resources. This video is part 1 of 3 video lectures for week 3. In this week's material, we will first look at the topic of how to do good online research. We will then briefly revisit the Who Am I stage of the career life planning model, and we will look specifically at it with an emphasis on looking at the acronym PULL. Then we will move on to look in more depth at stage 2 of the model, what's out there, and the resources that fit with that part of the model. And then to finish off, I will touch on the homework you need to focus on this week. Last week, we explored resources to help clients with the Who Am I stage of the career life planning model. And this week, we will just revisit Who Am I briefly just to make a connection between that stage and the PULL acronym. And then this week, we will focus more specifically on the stage What's Out There and the resources that fit with this stage. Before we do that, I would like to just touch on the topic of doing research and particularly doing online research, since that is for the most part our go-to approach these days when we need more information on a topic. We could spend a great deal of time on the topic of doing online research, and in fact there are entire courses out there on how to do good research. But we want to take just a few minutes to consider how you can do good research when you're working in the field as a practitioner. You may do online research at any stage of the model as you are working with clients. As we've talked about in previous weeks, clients will ask you a very broad range of questions. Some questions you might be able to answer based on your own knowledge, while for other questions you might need to do some research to find the information or resources to help answer the client's question. It's important to note that a great deal of career-related information is available online, and it can be very overwhelming for both you and the client when you are trying to do a search on a particular topic. It's important to know that some of the information is very good and very credible, some of it is bad and sometimes deliberately misleading, and some of it might be just downright useless or outdated. So very important that you as a practitioner look at the information that you find online with a critical eye. And of course, last week we learned about the ABCD model, which allows you to evaluate the accuracy and credibility of information that you're finding along with the resources. The more effectively that you do research online, the better will be the information that you find for your use or to share with clients. What I'm going to ask you to do here is to pause the video and please watch these YouTube videos that you see at the links here. Unfortunately, as you're watching the video, of course, you can't click on these links to access it. The links for these 2 videos are posted on Blackboard under week 3. So please stop here for a moment and just go and watch these 2 videos. They focus on using Google as a search engine. So these 2 videos that you have just watched provided you with a number of important tips on how to get good information, how to refine your searches, and so on. There are, of course, aside from Google, many other search engines that can be used, and it's very important that you note, if you are using Google, which most people do use these days, it's really important to know that Google presents sponsored results first. So these are results that other organizations or individuals have paid to have appear at the top of the list. Those are paid results. And so they may be good websites and good resources, or they may not be, but it's important to know that, and these are usually clearly identified at the top of the list. If you just look in little tiny letters, it says sponsored results, or it says it's an ad or something like that. It is usually best to skip over those and go to the actual results below the sponsored links. It's not to say that the sponsored links are all bad, but, and this is, I freely admit this is my bias, I tend to skip over those and go down to the ones that I know are not sponsored. It's important to also note that Google remembers and records your searches. And some of you may be okay with that, and some of you may be uncomfortable with that. I like the convenience of having Google remember my searches, because if I was looking at a website a few days ago and I can't remember what it was, but I use specific terms to find it, usually I can just drop those terms into the empty field, and it will go back to some of those results that I already had gotten a few days ago that I've forgotten about. So there are some assets and conveniences about using Google. And it's really your choice as to, whether or not you're comfortable with them remembering and recording your searches. There are other sites like DuckDuckGo.com which do not track your information. So if you really want to be anonymous online, there are search engines like that which allow you to be completely anonymous, and they don't keep track of any of your information. Another thing that's important to know is that there are also meta search engines, and these can be very helpful if you tend to default to one specific search engine like Google most of the time. Other search engines may produce different results that will be just as good and equally valid. So rather than you taking the time to go to each of those search engines, Google and Firefox and Bing, or whichever ones you want to use, that you can also use a meta search engine, which will search all of the individual search engines. And you can see I've listed a couple there, dogpile.com and metacrawler.com. So these meta search engines, when you enter your terms in, will then do searches of all the individual search engines, and then we'll compile them, showing you which ones produce specific results for your topic. So this is very useful because, first of all, as you scan through the results of the different search engines, you can see if there are certain sites that are coming up consistently. And they are more likely to be good sites and popular sites, but again, it's important to evaluate them using the ABCD model. And then the other benefit of doing a meta search using different search engines is that they will produce sometimes different results, and sometimes a particular resource or link may pop up in one search engine near the top that will be very useful for you, and it maybe doesn't show up in the results of these other search engines, or it shows up further down the line. So just important to know that you can do a search of search engines, and sometimes that is a very efficient way of going about doing online research. I'm going to pause this or stop this part 1 video here. I'm trying to divide our lectures into the individual topics. So I know this one was a bit short, but I'm going to stop here. And when you've had a break and you're ready, please do go on to having a look at the next video, which will revisit Who Am I and introduce you to the acronym PULL.